Hello, Reddit. I honestly never pictured myself posting my life story here, but I suppose reality has a peculiar way of serving up plot twists. I'm a 34-year-old man working in industrial equipment sales. Think massive conveyor belts, robotic packaging arms, and the kind of heavy machinery that serves as the unsung hero of every warehouse and distribution center. I've dedicated 8 years to my company, climbing the ladder from an inside sales desk to a regional manager position. My wife, Laura, who is 32, works as a part-time yoga instructor and picks up freelance graphic design projects when she can. We have been married for 3 years, and our entire relationship spans 6 years. Our story began at a local brewery during a heated trivia night. She was a member of the rival team that edged mine out for the win, mostly because my knowledge of 2000s pop culture is embarrassingly deficient. Who would have thought? Before we married, we established a very solid prenuptial agreement, a decision I made after witnessing several colleagues have their finances completely decimated by messy divorces. To my surprise, Laura was completely agreeable to it. She said she understood the logic of protecting the assets we each brought into our union. For the past several months, Laura has been driving a 2019 model that has been plagued with persistent transmission problems. It wasn't a total breakdown, but one of those nagging, intermittent issues that leaves you constantly anxious, wondering if today is the day you'll be stranded and calling for an Uber. She had been dropping hints about wanting something newer, more dependable. About 2 months ago, her hints became much more direct. She started showing me online listings for a certified pre-owned Subaru Outback. Nothing extravagant, just a sensible vehicle priced around $28,000. The challenge was that we didn't have that kind of liquid cash just sitting around. We had been channeling our extra income aggressively toward paying down my student loans and our mortgage. Still, I felt she deserved a car she could count on. I figured I could pick up some extra hours to make it a reality. So, I began volunteering for every overtime opportunity that came my way, including weekends, late-night client calls, and covering shifts for my coworkers. For nearly 2 solid months, I was pulling 65 to 70-hour weeks, diligently stashing every extra dollar into a separate account I mentally labeled the car fund. Laura seemed supportive and understanding. She often mentioned how much she admired my work ethic. To keep her from being lonely while I was working late, her best friend, Rachel, would frequently come over. Rachel is divorced, works at a healthcare startup, and has always been a cool, supportive friend. They'd have their wine nights, binge-watch their favorite shows, and just enjoy each other's company. Last Tuesday, I finished a site visit much earlier than anticipated. A job that was scheduled for 3 hours was completed in a mere 20 minutes. This meant I arrived home around 7:30 p.m., a stark contrast to my usual 10 p.m. return. As I approached the house, I could hear Laura and Rachel's voices drifting from the kitchen. It was then that I overheard Rachel mention something about timing, and Laura replied that she needed to be strategic about when she made her move. Initially, my mind went to innocent places, assuming they were planning a surprise party or a secret work project. But then Laura went on, saying she had been contemplating it a great deal recently, especially with me being so consumed by overtime, and that this presented the perfect window of opportunity to see what else was out there. Rachel wholeheartedly agreed. She said Laura absolutely deserved to explore her options. Rachel even offered to assist with the logistics of it all. Laura voiced some concern about the potential financial fallout, but Rachel brushed it off, reassuring her that she could always fall back on her current situation if the new venture didn't pan out, adding that I would probably take her back because I'm, in her words, too nice for my own good. In that instant, a chilling cold washed over me. This wasn't about a birthday surprise. This was my wife, aided by her best friend, plotting to cheat on me while keeping our marriage as her safety net. I quietly backed away, sat in my truck for a full 10 minutes trying to process, and then just drove aimlessly for an hour. When I finally returned home, I slipped back into my normal routine. Over the next few days, Laura began dropping subtle hints about how people sometimes need space, how they can love each other but still want to explore other connections. So very subtle, right? On Friday night, she finally initiated the talk, suggesting that perhaps we had gotten married too young. We were 28 and 31 at the time. She insisted she loved me, but she wasn't certain she was still in love with me. I suggested she could stay with Rachel for a little while. If our connection was meant to last, we would find our way back to each other. I directly asked if there was someone else involved. She swore, "Of course not. I would never do that to you." She just needed time alone to figure herself out. Conveniently, Rachel had already offered her a place to stay, and they were even thinking about taking a short trip somewhere for her to clear her head. So I responded, "Okay, if that's what you need, I support you. I'll continue working, saving money, and I will give you all the time you require to sort things out." What I deliberately omitted was that I had already scheduled a consultation with a divorce attorney that Thursday morning. Laura moved out on Sunday, packing her clothes, laptop, books, and the essentials for what she framed as a temporary separation. She hugged me at the door, whispering that she hoped we could work through this, that this wasn't necessarily the end, but just a pause to gain clarity. Monday morning, my first stop was the bank. I transferred our entire savings, including the $12,000 car fund I had painstakingly accumulated, into a new account solely in my name. Thanks to our prenup, this was perfectly within my legal rights. Her name was never on my work-related accounts, and I left our joint checking account untouched, except for redirecting my direct deposit. By Tuesday, I had the divorce papers drawn up. Nothing spiteful, just a clean, straightforward dissolution based on irreconcilable differences. The prenup made it incredibly simple. We each keep what we brought into the marriage. If we sell the house, the equity is split. No alimony. On Wednesday, Laura texted, asking if I'd had any thoughts about us, and if I was ready for a serious discussion about improving our relationship. I replied that I had many thoughts and was definitely ready to talk. I asked if she could come by on Thursday evening. She seemed thrilled. She replied that she had also been doing a lot of thinking about our future and was eager to discuss it. Thursday evening, she showed up with takeout and launched into a speech about how her time away had made her realize just how much she missed our shared life. She suggested that maybe she had been overthinking everything, and that sometimes you need to step away to truly appreciate what you have. That was my cue. I handed her the divorce papers. I have never witnessed a person's facial expression change so dramatically and so quickly. She went from nervous optimism to utter confusion to pure rage in the span of about 15 seconds. She started demanding to know what this was, if it was some kind of sick joke, and why I was being so theatrical over her needing a little bit of space. I told her I knew exactly what kind of space she was looking for, and I had decided to grant her all the space in the world, permanently. She demanded to know what I was talking about, so I told her. I told her I had overheard her conversation with Rachel last Tuesday. I didn't hear everything, because I couldn't bear to stay for the entire planning session, but I heard enough to understand she was preparing to cheat and fully expected me to be waiting here like a devoted golden retriever after she had exhausted her other options. The look of guilt on her face confirmed everything I needed to know. She tried to backtrack, claiming I had misunderstood, that I'd taken things out of context, that she would never have actually done anything. I told her that was wonderful news because it meant the divorce would be even smoother. No messy infidelity claims, just two people who wanted different things from life. Then she pivoted to money, specifically asking if she could use the savings account to get her own place and perhaps buy that reliable car since she would be starting over. I informed her that the savings account had been closed. The money I had earned from working 60-plus-hour weeks for the past 2 months was now in an account she had no access to. Because, ironically, I had decided I wasn't going to finance her exploration phase after all. That's when she truly became furious. She accused me of being controlling, of financial abuse for cutting her off from money she was counting on. I calmly reminded her that according to our legally binding prenup, the money I earned was mine, and she hadn't contributed a single dollar to the car fund she had intended to use for her journey of self-discovery. She left around 9:00 p.m., taking her uneaten takeout with her. So, Reddit, am I the bad guy here? A part of me questions if I should have confronted her immediately after hearing the conversation, giving her a chance to explain or deny it. Maybe I did misinterpret everything, and she was just having a quarter-life crisis that had nothing to do with infidelity. But truthfully, the more I replay it in my head, the more convinced I am that I heard exactly what I thought I heard. I'm not trying to ruin her life or leave her destitute. She has a job. She can live with Rachel. She is a grown woman capable of figuring out her own transportation and housing. I just fail to see why I should be expected to bankroll her adventure in self-discovery, especially when it seemed destined to involve exploring other people's mattresses. But perhaps I'm being too harsh. Maybe I should have tried to work it out. I'm open to your thoughts, Reddit. I have some decisions to make about what comes next. A few days later, an update was posted. Well, Reddit, you certainly had some thoughts. And by some thoughts, I mean my inbox was flooded with more notifications than a packaging line during the holiday rush. The overwhelming consensus was that I was NTA and needed to stop second-guessing what I overheard. Many of you pointed out that Laura's immediate reaction upon receiving the divorce papers was a confession in itself. If she were truly innocent, her first emotion would have been heartbreak and confusion, not an immediate panic about her financial situation and access to bank accounts. That observation really hit home. An innocent person would be devastated by the prospect of divorce, not instantly calculating their financial options. Several people suggested I should document everything and try to gather more concrete evidence, but I have no desire to play the role of a private investigator. I know what I heard. Her reaction confirmed it. I'm not going to start tailing her with a camera or digging through her phone records. That's just not the person I want to become. Some of you also warned me that Laura would likely come back with a flood of tears and promises once the reality of the situation sank in. It turns out, Reddit possesses some prophetic abilities because that's precisely what transpired. Laura showed up at my house at 6:30 a.m. on Friday, the day after I served her. I was just getting ready for work when I heard frantic pounding on the front door, loud enough to wake the entire neighborhood. This time, she claimed, she wanted to have a real talk. No more games, no drama. She admitted that she had been considering other options, but seeing the divorce papers was a brutal wake-up call. It made her realize she was terrified of commitment and that she didn't want anyone else, that I was the best thing that had ever happened to her, and that she had been an absolute fool. I told her I appreciated her honesty, but that ship had already sailed. If she had wanted to work on our marriage, she could have done that before she started co-planning her affair with Rachel's assistance. That's when the story got more interesting. She began blaming Rachel, claiming her friend had been poisoning her mind with ideas about how she was settling and deserved to see what else was out there. She painted Rachel as being bitter about her own divorce and projecting that bitterness onto our marriage. Laura insisted she never would have acted on any of it if I hadn't jumped straight to divorce. I asked her, was there a specific someone you were planning to explore with, or was this more of a general shopping trip? She was silent for a long moment before confessing that there was a guy from her yoga studio who had been flirting with her for months. Nothing had ever happened, she swore, but she was curious about what it might be like. Rachel had been the one pushing her to find out, telling her life was too short to live with what-ifs. So there it was, not just a theoretical exploration, but a specific target. I told her I appreciated her finally being truthful, but it didn't change anything for me. She broke down crying, begging for us to try counseling, saying that throwing away 6 years together was insane. But Reddit, something many of you said really resonated with me. She wasn't sorry she planned to cheat. She was sorry she got caught. If I hadn't overheard that conversation, she would have proceeded with her plan, fully expecting me to be her fallback option when she was done. I told her I would think about it, mostly to get her to leave so I could get to work, but my mind was already made up. Another incident occurred over the weekend, and this is where more of your advice proved invaluable. Laura tried to access our joint checking account and discovered I had rerouted my direct deposit. She called me Saturday morning in a panic, asking about it. I explained that since we were divorcing, it only made sense to fully separate our finances. She grew agitated, claiming she needed money for basic living expenses and couldn't survive on her yoga income alone. I calmly reminded her that, per our prenup, we were each responsible for our own expenses during the separation. She could take on more hours, find more graphic design clients, or explore other options. Several of you had warned me to be ready for the "I can't support myself" argument and a potential push for spousal support, so I was prepared for this conversation. This turned out to be excellent advice. On Monday morning, Rachel called me. It was the first time we'd spoken since this whole mess started. She said she wanted me to know that Laura was in a really bad place and that maybe I was being too harsh. Laura made a mistake, she argued, but she didn't deserve to have her life ruined over it. I asked Rachel if she thought I deserved to have my life blown up because of Laura's mistake. I asked if she thought I should have just quietly funded Laura's affair and waited patiently for her to decide if she wanted to keep me or trade me in. Rachel went silent for a moment, then stammered that she hadn't realized I'd overheard them and that maybe she had given Laura some bad advice. I told Rachel that Laura is an adult who makes her own choices, and if she's struggling now, she needs to find her own solutions. I was no longer her backup plan or her safety net. Rachel tried to argue that Laura never actually did anything, that thinking about something and doing it are two different things. I pointed out that planning to do something and getting caught before you can are not that different. If I hadn't found out, Laura would have followed through. The conversation ended quickly after that. So, Reddit, I'm following your advice and staying the course. No reconciliation talks, no counseling, no, let's work this out. I am moving forward with the divorce and letting Laura figure out her own life. A few people asked if I felt bad serving her papers at the exact moment she was supposedly coming back to fix things. Honestly, no. She didn't come back because she had an epiphany about her love for me. She came back because whatever she imagined was out there didn't materialize, and I was the safe, comfortable option. That isn't love, it's convenience. My next update will likely be after I hear from my lawyer about the timeline and next steps. Thank you for all the reality checks, Reddit. It's been incredibly helpful to have these outside perspectives. Update 2, Reddit. You beautiful, chaotic community. Your predictive powers continue to be shockingly on point. Remember how you all said Laura would escalate things once she realized the polite, tearful approach wasn't working? Well, buckle up. Monday started normally enough, if you can call any of this normal. I was trying to catch up on work I'd let slide amidst the domestic implosion when I got a summons from my HR department. Someone had placed an anonymous call, alleging that I was going through a contentious divorce and might be emotionally unstable and a liability at work. Now, as you know, I sell heavy industrial equipment. My clients are pragmatic warehouse managers and operations directors who care far more about their conveyor belts running smoothly than they do about my personal life. But HR has to take any such report seriously. So I had to endure a profoundly awkward conversation about my emotional well-being and whether I needed to take time off or use the company's counseling services. I explained the situation briefly. Divorce proceedings are underway, handled by lawyers, and there has been zero impact on my job performance. My manager thankfully backed me up, pointing out my sales numbers had actually been higher than ever. All that overtime paid off in more ways than one, but it was still a humiliating experience. It took me all of 30 seconds to deduce the source of that anonymous call. On Tuesday, Laura texted, asking if we could meet to discuss logistics. Against my better judgment, and probably the collective wisdom of Reddit, I agreed. We did need to sort out some practical matters eventually. It was a massive mistake. Laura showed up looking like she'd been subsisting on energy drinks and pure stress, which was likely the truth. She started by apologizing, claiming she was sorry about the HR call, but she was desperate and didn't know how else to get my attention. I told her that contacting my employer was grossly inappropriate and asked what logistics needed discussing that couldn't be handled by our lawyers. That's when she dropped the bombshell. She was pregnant. Reddit, I'll save you the suspense. After about 10 minutes of my heart pounding in my chest and some rapid mental arithmetic, I realized the timeline was impossible. We hadn't been intimate since well before she moved out, which was only 3 weeks ago. It was too early for her to know for sure, too early for any symptoms, just too early for everything. It could have been from before, but she wasn't showing any signs I could see. When I pointed this out, she got defensive, saying she'd been feeling off for a while but didn't want to bother me while I was working so hard. She claimed she had taken a home test that morning and it was positive. I told her that if this was true, it was momentous news that would change the entire context of our divorce, and I wanted to go with her to a doctor to get it professionally confirmed. She demurred, saying she wasn't ready for that yet, that she needed time to process. But she wanted me to know that this changed everything, and we owed it to our child to try and work things out. I told her we would require medical confirmation before making any decisions, and that if she was pregnant, we would work out co-parenting arrangements through our attorneys. Her face fell. I think she expected me to call off the divorce on the spot and fall back into reconciliation mode. On Wednesday, I received a call from an unknown number. It was the yoga studio guy, the one Laura had planned to explore with. He wanted me to know that he had no idea Laura was married when she was flirting with him. He said she had told him we were separated and heading for divorce. But when Laura tried to escalate things, a mutual acquaintance informed him we were still very much married. He felt terrible about the whole situation and wanted to clear the air. I thanked him for the call and assured him he'd done nothing wrong. Laura had misrepresented our status, and he did the right thing by backing away when he learned the truth. But it confirmed something I had suspected. Laura's plan had been in motion for weeks, if not months. This wasn't some sudden crisis of faith in our marriage. On Thursday, Laura texted again, asking if I had thought about the pregnancy and what it meant for us. I replied that I would be happy to discuss co-parenting as soon as she had medical confirmation. She immediately called me, furious that I was being so cold about our potential child. I clarified that I wasn't being cold, I was being rational. If she was pregnant, we would handle it responsibly, but I wasn't going to make life-altering decisions based on a home test and vague feelings. She hung up on me. Friday was the grand finale of the week. I got home from work to find Laura's car in the driveway and Laura herself sitting on my front porch steps. She looked like she had been waiting for a while. She said she needed to tell me the absolute truth about everything because she couldn't live with the lies anymore. So I sat down and listened. The pregnancy, it turned out, was a complete fabrication, a desperate, last-ditch effort to make me reconsider the divorce. She knew I would insist on medical proof, and the whole charade would collapse. The thing with the yoga guy was real, but more advanced than she had let on. They had been texting for months, had gone on a few coffee dates, and she had fully intended to sleep with him during our trial separation. Rachel had been cheering her on the entire time, telling Laura she deserved to see what else was out there before being tied down forever. But when Laura tried to make her move, yoga guy backed off after learning she was still married. That's when her grand plan began to unravel. She claimed receiving the divorce papers was the ultimate wake-up call, making her realize she was about to lose the best thing in her life over a childish fantasy. She said she'd been watching too many romantic comedies and listening to too much bad advice from Rachel. She tearfully asked if there was any chance I could forgive her, if we could start over. I have to be honest, seeing her so utterly broken was difficult. This wasn't the confident woman who had demanded space to find herself. This was someone who had gambled her entire life on a fantasy and lost. But then I remembered what so many of you had warned me about. She would come back with tears and confessions only after realizing the consequences were real, and that I shouldn't let temporary remorse obscure the fundamental breach of trust. She was willing to betray me and saw me only as her safety net. I told her I appreciated her honesty, but it didn't change the facts. She had made these choices over months of planning, not in a single moment of weakness. The only reason she was confessing now was because her plan had failed, and she was facing real, unavoidable consequences. She asked what she was supposed to do now, where she was supposed to go. I told her those were questions she should have asked herself before she decided to blow up our life together. She left around 9 p.m. and hasn't contacted me since. Rachel, however, called on Saturday morning. Apparently, Laura was staying with her and was a complete wreck. Rachel wanted to know if I was satisfied with ruining Laura's life and if I had any capacity for mercy. I told Rachel that Laura had ruined her own life, and I was simply refusing to go down with the ship. If Rachel truly wanted to help her friend, she would focus on helping her figure out a path forward instead of pressuring me to clean up the mess. Rachel called me heartless. I said I was being realistic. The conversation didn't last long. So Reddit, the divorce is moving forward. No more fake pregnancies or calls to my HR department, and I'm somehow the villain for refusing to play the role of the backup husband. Your advice to stand firm and not fall for manipulative tactics was spot on. It's been tempting to feel guilty, especially seeing Laura so defeated, but you were right. She isn't sad because she hurt me. She's sad because of the consequences of her actions. Thank you for keeping me sane through all this. Reddit, Update 3. Remember when I thought things might be settling down? Yeah, that was adorably naive. Your collective wisdom about Laura not going quietly into that good night was, once again, eerily accurate. This past week has been a masterclass in the creative problem-solving people employ when their backs are against the wall. It started on Monday with a call from my lawyer. Laura had filed a motion claiming I was hiding assets and was petitioning for temporary spousal support while the divorce proceeded. Her filing painted a picture of me suddenly draining our joint accounts, leaving her financially stranded. My lawyer wasn't worried. Our prenup specifically covers this exact situation, and I have documentation proving the funds came from my overtime work. But it meant more legal fees and more delays, which I suspect was the real goal. Tuesday brought a stranger development. I got a call from my mortgage company asking about my intentions for the house. Apparently, someone had called them, claiming to represent both parties in our divorce, to inquire about the options for one spouse to assume the mortgage entirely. That someone was not my lawyer. Laura had called them herself, using her maiden name but identifying herself as my wife, and tried to get information on refinancing options. She had somehow gotten our case number and tried to use it to sound official. The mortgage company, bound by privacy rules, couldn't give her any information without legal authorization, but they wanted to confirm with me if this inquiry was legitimate. I had to explain that my wife was not authorized to make inquiries on my behalf and was likely trying to find a loophole to claim the house, despite our prenup. On Wednesday, things took a turn for the truly bizarre. I came home from work to find my next-door neighbor waiting for me in her front yard. She's a retired school teacher in her 70s, always pleasant in that neighborly way where you discuss the weather but not your life story. She wanted to let me know that a young woman had come to her door that afternoon asking questions about me. Had she heard loud arguments recently? Did she ever see other women coming and going from my house? Did I seem like a controlling or aggressive person? The woman identified herself as a social worker doing a routine check-in on a reported domestic disturbance. She was polite and professional, but my neighbor found the whole thing odd because she'd never seen any hint of trouble from our house. It seems my neighbor is sharper than she lets on. She had asked the social worker for identification or a business card, at which point the woman became flustered and left abruptly. My neighbor's description of the woman matched Rachel perfectly. I thanked her for the heads up and immediately called my lawyer. He advised that while this was technically harassment and we could file a report, it might be more strategic to simply document everything and use it as a pattern of behavior if Laura tried to claim I was being unreasonable later. On Thursday, I decided to be proactive and called Rachel directly. She feigned ignorance at first, claiming she had no idea what I was talking about. When I relayed my neighbor's description and the social worker story, she got defensive, insisting she was just trying to help a friend. I informed Rachel that impersonating a social worker was a serious offense, and that her campaign of contacting my employer, my mortgage lender, and now my neighbors constituted harassment. I told her if she really wanted to help Laura, she should advise her to focus on moving on, not on sabotaging the divorce. Rachel accused me of being paranoid and insisted she'd done nothing illegal, that Laura was just a desperate woman trying to understand her legal options. I told her Laura had a lawyer for her legal options, and that polling neighbors about domestic abuse wasn't a legal strategy. It was an act of desperation. Rachel hung up on me. Friday was the week's grand finale. I was working a legitimately late night, an emergency on a packaging line at a food processing plant. I got home around 10 p.m. to find my front door was ajar. Reddit, I've seen enough true crime documentaries to know you don't just waltz into that situation. I called the police from my truck in the driveway and waited. The officers arrived and cleared the house. There was no sign of forced entry and nothing appeared to be missing, but I found something telling. A set of keys sitting squarely on my kitchen counter. They were Laura's house keys. She had apparently used her key to let herself in, look around, and then intentionally left the keys behind. No note, no explanation, just the keys. The police asked if I wanted to file a report. I said no, not yet, but I wanted it officially documented that Laura had entered the house without my permission and had returned her key in this manner. One of the officers, a woman about my age, asked if this was related to a domestic situation. I gave her the condensed version. She nodded grimly and said divorces make people do things that surprise everyone, including themselves. She strongly recommended I change the locks and consider getting a security camera to protect myself if things continued to escalate. On Saturday morning, I had all the locks changed. I then spent the afternoon installing a simple doorbell camera system that would record anyone approaching my front door. On Monday morning, my lawyer called with good news and bad news. The good news, Laura's motion for spousal support was denied. The prenup held up just as he'd predicted, and the judge was not impressed with her claim that I was hiding assets. The bad news, Laura's lawyer had filed for a continuance, claiming they needed more time to review financial documents. It meant more delays and more legal fees, though it was unlikely to change the final outcome. My lawyer said this was a common tactic in contested divorces. Laura was likely stalling, hoping I'd get tired of the legal bills and agree to a more favorable settlement for her just to make it end. He asked if I wanted to consider mediation or see it through. Your advice has been invaluable here, Reddit. A few months ago, I might have caved and gone to mediation just to be done with it. But you all have consistently pointed out that giving in to manipulation only encourages more of it. I told my lawyer to see it through to the very end. So that's where things stand. Laura has apparently graduated from fake pregnancies to amateur private investigation and light breaking and entering. Rachel is cosplaying as a social worker, and I'm learning that divorce brings out a level of creativity in people I never knew existed. Thank you for keeping me grounded. Your advice to expect escalation and to document everything has been more helpful than you can possibly know. Without this community's reality check, I might have started to feel guilty for Laura's downward spiral or Rachel's harassment campaign.